Good morning. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's cases. We have two cases. We're starting with Saddle Road this morning. Okay. The date is August 17th, 2023. This is case REZ2023-00005. It is a rezoning request from the AG2 district to the IL district. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will provide is the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. We can go ahead and get started with the first
Before
case.
we start, I just want to put the affidavit, the notice that it was advertised properly.
Okay, thank you. So then this will be Staff Exhibit 2 because Staff Exhibit 1 is the staff report. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. Stacy Ellis Hewitt with Banks Engineering. I've previously been accepted as an expert in land use planning and zoning matters, and I'd like to request to be accepted as such this morning.
Yes, thank you.
I do have the applicant's representatives and the PowerPoint.
Perfect, thank you. So that will be Applicant's Exhibit 1, and I did receive the 48-hour letter, which is Applicant Exhibit A.
Okay, thank you. With me also this morning is the applicant representative, Donald Scrotenborg. The applicant for the property is Halter Holdings, LLC. We're in the planning district of the Gateway Airport area. And this is a request for a conventional rezoning of approximately 16.92 acres from AG2 district to Light Industrial District IL. The site is 4 parcels east of the intersection of Saddle Road and Halter Lane, and it's in the southeast quadrant of Daniels Parkway and Treeline Avenue. This is the future land use category for the site and the surrounding properties is Tradeport, and the applicant does own the associated case REZ 2023-00004 is 8.5 acres to the east, which is also within the Tradeport category. Saddle Road is a county-maintained local as well as Halter Lane, and the Treeline Avenue is a county-maintained arterial, and Daniels Parkway is a county-maintained arterial. One item I did want to bring to the hearing examiner's attention is that there is, on September 7th of 21, the Board of County Commissioners approved a new right-in, right-out access point onto Daniels that's going to add some further circulation for this corridor. And that access, it's actually on this property here, and it's proposed in approximately this location. And that will provide some further traffic circulation for the area.
And that connects to Saddle Road?
It's gonna take Saddle, it's in for South Florida. It's not in for permitting with Lee County yet, and the South Florida permit hasn't yet been approved. But what's proposed on the current plans is to take Saddle Road and pull it through the site. It'll be privately maintained but public access, and it'll take Saddle over to Belgian, and then there will be an access point to Daniels through there. It'll be a right-in, right-out that'll provide some further circulation in here. I do have a copy of the Board of County Commissioners access resolution if you would like a copy of it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Thank you.
So that will be Applicant's Exhibit 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacy.
The zoning of the subject property is agricultural. To the north, in the northwest corner, is CG that was zoned by zoning resolution ZAB 83-314. To the east is an IPD, an industrial plan development. The current resolution for that is Z12020, and also the adjacent applicant's other proposed industrial zoning. The two separate cases were because they're separated by a wetland preserve that bifurcates the property in the center. And it's in 2 distinctly separate development areas with 2 separate stormwater basins, separate access, and no interconnections between the 2 properties. To the west is also additional CG zoning by zoning resolution Z8245, and there's also a portion zoned agricultural, and to the south is agricultural. Again, I also have copies of the zoning resolutions for these. If you do want those for the record, I could submit them, or...
No, my only question, because there was talk of it bifurcating several times. The only place I could see where it looked like the lot line was included was on attachment D, which was the ERP impact map. Is that the line essentially that's separating the two this here that shows the easement? Is that a drainage easement, I assume, or utility?
It's a utility and drainage easement that runs between the two properties, and then there's also a drainage easement along the south property line. And the South Florida permit and the conservation easements that have been submitted show that even the conservation easements had to be separated in that area. So they just separate the parcel into two separate development areas.
Okay, so they are two completely separate standalone developments, or are they? Because the ADD that was included combined the acreage into like 25 acres or something like.
Correct, and the South Florida permit came in together as well. But although the overall site's 25.42 acres, it's two separate development pods, and the entire development acreage is 17.36 acres out of the two. Okay. Staff does recommend approval of the request. The applicant's in agreement with the staff report and the recommendation of approval. And I would like to request to incorporate the staff report with the attachments as well as the 48-hour notice and attachments as part of my testimony today. Having said that, there's no public present, so we do comply with the land development code and the Lee plan, the findings, specifically the trade port. The existing agricultural zoning is inconsistent with the trade port future land use category, so we're requesting a zoning category that brings it into compliance. The staff report does go into a lot of detail about the comprehensive plan compliance, so I'm not going to go through it unless there's anything specific you'd like to hear. Let's see, and again, it also complies with the land development code. There's no deviations or variances along with the request, but there is an associated administrative deviation from Chapter 10 that's attached to the staff report. That attachment also references some letters from the Lee County Port Authority that I don't believe are in the record, and I do have those if you would like them for your records.
Yes, thank you. And that'll be applicant's exhibit 3. Thank you very much. I'm assuming there was no objections, and that was what was referenced in the ADD, but I assume that covered the zoning request as well?
Yes, it was a typical letter that brings up all of the applicable Port Authority regulations, and then just in this, we will be coordinating with them and be required to coordinate with them at the time of development order as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. The request is compatible with the existing and planned uses in the surrounding area, and access sufficient to support the proposed development intensity will be provided. And a traffic impact statement will be issued and reviewed at the time of development order demonstrating such. The expected impacts on transportation facilities will be addressed by the existing county regulations and conditions of approval, or excuse me, no conditions on conventional zoning. It will not adversely affect environmentally critical or sensitive areas. The South Florida Water Management Permit does have a approximately 4.37 acre conservation easement, which would exceed the indigenous requirement on the site. And it also is served by urban services. We're not in a future urban area, we're in a future suburban area, but there are adequate public facilities as demonstrated in the staff report. And with that, based on my experience and preparation of the request does meet the required findings and review criteria, and we believe it is entitled for approval. that concludes my presentation unless you have any questions.
The only other question I had was the DO that's referenced. It was a 2023 DO, and it just talked about filling some wetland areas. Is there actually development that's proposed as part of that DO as well?
Not at this time. It is just for the site work for clearing and filling.
And did that cover both properties or just the Saddle Road?
It is both.
For both, okay, thank you. That was
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Beth.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Beth Workman. I'm a principal planner with the zoning section. I've been accepted in this forum as an expert in the Lee Plan and Land Development Code, and I wish to do so today as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So first, a little housekeeping. I have PowerPoint.
Thank you. So that'll be Staff Exhibit 3. Thank you very much.
So the case before us today is REZ 2023-00005, Saddle Road Rezone. The request and recommendation is to rezone 16.92 acres from AG2 to light industrial. Staff has recommended approval. A little bit of the background. Ms. Hewitt went through the surrounding uses. This property does abut to the east an IPD. It has an IPD here, the general commercial here, and some commercial and IPD, as well as the other property that's in for rezone as well. To the north is Daniels Parkway, and then across the street is the city of Fort Myers, with some other mixed use of properties in AG2. To the south is all AG2. Future land use is Tradeport. There is existing utilities. As Ms. Hewitt stated, there are 2 separate stormwater basins. There's no interconnections. There's a big wetland that kind of separates the 2 pieces, and they have separate access points. The flux map that shows the different types of vegetation on the site indicates that there are some indigenous areas and wetlands. There is a South Florida Water Management District permit that is in, and staff included some of the documents from that permit as attachments to the staff report to show the conservation easement limits as well as any impacts to wetlands that were permitted through the state. And as you can see, the wetland impacts, this is from the South Florida Water Management District permit, showing the impacts and then the preservation to meet the Lee Plan policies for 124.2.1. Staff included this master plan into the staff report because it does show the vertical construction component to this, where the development order that had been submitted was just a clear and fill. So that was establishing more of the wet and dry detention areas as well as the conservation easement for the county. And the ERP shows more of the site plan, so you can kind of see what's going on with the compatibility with the adjacent uses. And like I said, Daniels is to the north, and you have the IPDs and commercial components over here, and you can kind of see the lay of the land on what the scheme is for the development footprint. There's an administrative deviation that's currently under review, and this administrative deviation is to ask for relief from some of the Chapter 10 requirements that cannot be met due to the airport and the 10,000-foot hazardous wildlife area. So some of the lakes within that are going to have to be either hardened or a different type, no littorals in those areas, that kind of thing, so that the wildlife attractants are kept to a minimal. The development order 23-110, like I said, is a clear and fill for lake excavation. Ms. Hewitt went through this in detail. Staff believes that the applicant has demonstrated compliance with the LEA plan for this development, as well as the land development code. They're going to be over the open space requirement. It's an industrial site, so the buffering will have the 15-foot wide buffers, no buffers between the industrial and the commercial. There is an extensive wetland preserve being proposed. The transportation facilities will be examined more in depth through the traffic impact statement submitted at time of development order, but staff did review those, and like Ms. Hewitt says, there is a turn lane proposed with the other developing property that's going to help this property. The existing Saddle Road will be able to handle the industrial traffic that this property would produce. Environmentally critical, as mentioned, it's going to be over on the indigenous open space. It's preserving the wetland, and then there's a wetland fringe of upland buffer around that wetland proposed through the state permitting process. The site does have the urban services to support the use. LEA plan policies, I bring Tradeport because it is in the Tradeport, but I want to talk a little bit about the ins and outs of Tradeport. This is an industrial proposed use. There's no commercial that may be proposed on this site, because if it is proposed, it would have to come back in through an industrial plan development per that LEA plan policy. So I just want to put that on the record. And that goes for standalone commercial as well as any commercial component that is accessory to an industrial use. So if they had, a showroom or something, and then they were making a product in the back industrial, that would need to all come in through the IPD process. The property meets policy 2.1.1 through the future land use category. The development timing, it does have the supported urban services to support it, as well as the EMS, fire, and police protection, as stated in the staff report. Sewer and water. We've touched on environmental. You can see that the preserve in the center of the property with no connections going through the property. And then the industrial land uses, it does meet the Tradeport future land use category with adjacent to the industrial plan development, as well as some general commercial. It does comply with 7.1 and 7.1.2 with the addition of the industrial development. It's not in the mixed use overlay. It is in Tradeport, so it meets the requirements for industrial development in the land uses. Again, the timing in the industrial development will be permitted only with the availability of adequate existing services. It does have those. There was a letter of availability applied in the application. The buffering and screening will be handled at time of development order. If the applicant cannot meet those requirements, they will need to come back in for a variance. But as it stands right now, there is over the amount of open space, and the buffering will be 15 foot on the right-of-ways. Hazardous wildlife, I mentioned this. This is what the administrative deviation is touching on. Through that, Chapter 10 deviation can be done administratively for the lake bank slopes to go to a 4-to-1, as well as limiting the amount of littorals, and then the tall structure information that will need to come in as part of that ADD. Surface water management, they will need to provide adequate surface water management at time of development order. As it stands right now, there is wet and dry detentions proposed on the property as demonstrated in the development order plans that were in for the clear and fill. Again, this is environmental. Like I said, they have the indigenous wetland. The hazardous wildlife is being dealt with through the ADD process. There's not any well field protection located close to this property, and they are getting the South Florida Water Management District permit. So with that, it meets the requirements through the land development code, as well as the LEA plan is compatible with the future land use category and the adjacent properties. will provide the access. And further in-depth review will happen at time of DO through the TIS, as I mentioned. You can see that large projects and industrials, 20% open space, 50% of that, 10% needs to be indigenous. They're way over. And then the LEED plan. So with that, staff recommends approval, meets the LEED plan and the land development code.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I did not have any further questions. Did the applicant have anything?
Just one clarification, just as far as the commercial uses, it's just the retail commercial uses that are limited in the trade port.
Correct.
Thank you. I did not have any further questions. Thank you to both of you. It was a very thorough staff report, and the applicant's narrative was very helpful too. So we can go ahead and transition to the next case if that's okay. So that case number is REZ 2023-00004, and that's referenced as the Intrepid Lane rezoning.
For the record, Stacy Ellis Hewitt with Banks Engineering, representing the applicant. I've previously been accepted as an expert witness in land use and zoning matters, and again, request to be accepted as.
Yes, thank you.
I do have the applicant's PowerPoint and the list of representatives for this case.
Okay, thank you. And that will again be applicant's Exhibit 1. And there was also a 48-hour letter in this case, which was applicant's Exhibit A.
Thank you. The request for this site is for a conventional rezoning of approximately 8.5 acres from agricultural AG2 to light industrial IL. And this again is in the Gateway Airport Planning District. The site is located, it's 2 parcels on the west side of Intrepid Lane, south of Saddle Road, in the southeast quadrant of Daniels Parkway and Treeline Avenue. Intrepid Lane is a non-county maintained local road, which connects to Saddle Road, which is county maintained local, and Halter Lane is also county maintained local road. And the Treeline and Daniels are both county maintained arterial roadways. The future land use for the site and surrounding area is Tradeport, and we have the adjacent cases listed, shown on the map as well. Again, the additional access point has been approved by the board as right in, right out access to Daniels Road that'll provide further connection for the area. Saddle Road and Halter Lane do provide sufficient access, but this will provide additional circulation in the area. I do have a copy of the resolution to submit for this case as well.
Just to keep the record nice and clean.
Yes.
And that will again be applicant's Exhibit 2. Thank you very much.
The zoning on the site is agricultural today, AG2, and to the west is also agricultural. The applicant's adjacent proposed light industrial zoning. To the north, we have the IPD zoning, industrial plan development, and to the northeast is commercial parking, CP, and tourist commercial is also across to the east. We also have some general commercial up to the north as well. The CT zoning is over on the east, and then to the south we have agricultural zoning. Their site again is separated by the wetland preserve, bifurcating the property, 2 separate development areas, 2 separate stormwater basins with separate access and no interconnects. It's separated by the wetland as well as utility and drainage easements between the parcels along the west property line and along the south property line as well.
And I did yesterday, I did do the site visit, and I drove down Intrepid to the point where even in my big SUV, I didn't dare go any further because there's the bit, is that where the property line?
Yes, the property line is just at the end of the road here, south part where the IPD is adjacent to it as well. The staff report does recommend approval. The applicant's in agreement with the staff report and recommendation, and I do request to incorporate the staff report in 48-hour notice with attachments as part of my testimony today. The request does comply with the required findings and review criteria in Land Development Code, Section 34-145. It does comply with the LEA plan, specifically the trade court, policy 1.1.13. The existing agricultural zoning is inconsistent, and the requested industrial zoning IL is consistent with the land use category. Again, the staff report and attached narrative go through the LEA plan compliance in quite some detail. The existing public services and public facilities adjacent and surrounding the site are sufficient and adequate to for objectives 2.1 and 2.2 with the compact and contiguous development pattern. It's also consistent with the 4.1.1 adequate utilities, as well as policy 4.1.4. On this case, I did want to bring up, I believe the South Florida permit's attached, but I don't believe the conservation easement was attached, and I do have a copy of that if you'd like it for the record. Okay, thank you.
That will be applicant's Exhibit 3. Thank you for bringing copies as well. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. The request also complies with the Industrial Goal 7 and policies for the industrial land uses, as well as the Objective 47.2 on airport compatibility. Again, this does have the administrative deviation that is attached to the staff report with the narrative, and I do have the Port Authority letter associated with this case
Yes.
for the record.
I know it's duplicative, but they're separate cases, so I want
Yes.
to make sure we have the record correct.
I appreciate that.
So that would be applicant's Exhibit 4. Thank you.
The request does comply with the comprehensive plan, and it also meets the code and other applicable county regulations. Again, there is the Chapter 10 deviations under concurrent review, and it does meet the requirements for the dimensional requirements for the industrial zoning, and compliance must be demonstrated at the time of development order. It is compatible with the existing and planned uses in the surrounding area. The industrial zoning proposed is encouraged in the Tradeport zoning category. Access is sufficient to support the proposed development, and a TIS will be submitted at the time of development order. The site is also in proximity to the interstate and the adjacent airport as well. Any impacts from traffic will be adequately addressed at the time of development order. Will not adversely affect environmentally critical or sensitive areas. The proposed conservation easement on this site is approximately 3.08 acres, which also exceeds the indigenous requirement for the site. And there were no protected species. Urban services defined by the LEA plan are demonstrated in the staff report and attachments and are adequate to support development on the site. And that concludes my presentation based on the experience and preparation of the request. I believe it does meet the required findings and review criteria, and we believe it's entitled to approval.
Good morning. Madam Hearing Examiner, for the record, I'm Mary Sue Groth, a planner with the Department of Community Development Zoning section. I've previously been qualified as an expert witness in land use planning, the Lee County Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan, and wish to do so again today. I'd like to submit the advertisement affidavit and my PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, thank you. So the notice will be accepted as Staff Exhibit 2. Thank you. Staff Exhibit 1 is the staff report, and then 3 will be the presentation. Thank you.
Shut her off. All right, I'll start with the applicant's request and staff recommendation. The applicant is requesting to rezone the approximately 8.5 acre subject properties on 13600 and 13650 Intrepid Lane from agricultural AG2 to conventional light industrial, and staff has found the case sufficient. Little background information, Stacy covered very well, but I'll run through my report as well. The subject properties for this case are located on 2 separate straps, accessible only by Intrepid Lane. Where's the zoom? Sorry, the laser right there. To the north, there are 2 industrial plan developments and commercial general and commercial parking districts above. To the east, there is a tourist commercial zoning. And to the west, agricultural AG2, as we know, is also owned by the applicant. Both properties are located in the trade port category according to the future land use map of the Lee County Comp Plan, and both are zoned AG2. As previously mentioned, the subject parcels abut the properties to the west, also owned by the applicant. Outlined there in the red dotted line. Those parcels were concurrently rezoned under a separate application previously heard by Ms. Workman on REZ 2023-00005. Staff had also found that rezone application sufficient. Collectively, all 6 parcels contain 8.06 acres of wetland preserve that divide the subject parcels from the southwesterly 2 abutting lots. The subject parcels combined with the 4 parcels subject to REZ 2023-00005 are approximately 25.42 acres in size total, and they include 20.30 acres of wetland. The South Florida Water Management District ERP includes a wetland impact map depicting the levels of mitigation that will be required for the impacts to the wetlands. The parcels subject to this request total 8.5 acres and contain 3.36 acres of the 8.06 acre preserve. It leaves about 5.14 acres of developable area on this subject property. Existing drainage and utility easements are located along the western and south property lines, creating a distinct separation of the properties. The parcels have 2 separate stormwater basins, as we established before, and have no interconnections and have separate access points. Both of these distinctions, the applicant has submitted 2 separate zoning applications because of. As we discussed, there is an administrative deviation request, ADD 2023-00119. It's seeking relief from the 3 LDC sections on the screen. LDC section 10-329 D1A1 for excavation setbacks from street right-of-way. LDC section 10329 D4 for retention and detention areas having sinuous shoreline, and 10-418 for bulkhead and hardened shoreline limits at 20%. Those are currently under review with county staff. There was also a development order application, DOS 2023-00099, that proposed a clear and fill depicting the wetland preserve and stormwater management for the entire 25.42 acres. That was included in the staff report, but had since been withdrawn, and then the new development order for DOS 2023-00110 for the same has been submitted and is under review as well. Those changes were added to the applicant's 48-hour letter. So rezone criteria from LDC section 34-145 to rezone. The following slides will demonstrate their compliance. As previously stated, the property resides in the Tradeport future land use category according to Lead Plan Policy 1.13. Tradeport areas are characterized by a mixture of commercial and industrial land uses and are compatible in existing surrounded uses, and the future land use category, the request to rezone to light industrial is consistent with the Tradeport policy. Objective 2.1 of the LEAP plan promotes contiguous and compact growth to contain urban sprawl. Rezoning the subject properties to light industrial provides consistency with the existing industrial development within the Tradeport future land use category. Policy 2.1.1, the proposed rezone will promote growth of the future suburban area per objective 2.2, where adequate public facilities exist and compact and contiguous development patterns can be created. LEAP plan policies 4.1.1 and 4.1.2, a letter of availability was provided by the applicant from LCU. And policy 4.1.1 for environmental, again, they did request the South Florida Water Management District ERP, so they are in compliance with that. The proposed preserve also contains high-quality natural plant communities that are being protected and exceeding the minimum indigenous vegetation requirements per LDC section 10-415. Fulfilling goal 7, as we've stated, industrial land uses. The proposed development is adjacent to existing IPDs and resides within the Tradeport future land use category. LEAP plan policies 7.1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. They are in compliance with. They are not requesting any variances. They will adhere to the land development code at the time of development. And the Tradeport future land use category does encourage industrial development. They have existing drainage and utility easements. They have plenty of proposed conservation wetlands, and again, the industrial uses are incentivized in the Tradeport category. 7.1.4, project is conveniently located within fire, EMS, sheriff, and transportation services, so they have plenty of existing facilities. It does not abut any residential properties, so it doesn't require any screening or buffering as 7.1.6 and 7.1.7 request. And 7.1.8, it is compliant again with the Tradeport future land use category. Objective 47.2, this speaks to development compatibility in the vicinity of airports to ensure hazards to aircraft operation and protect airport capacity and facilities. The subject properties are located within the airport wildlife protection zone, where upland habitats are discouraged for the protection of wildlife. They have demonstrated compliance with that. They have also established they will comply with all FAA regulations to minimize attractiveness to wildlife at the time of development order. There is a administrative deviation to Chapter 10 for lake bank slopes and excavation setbacks. The parcels are located within the Southwest Florida International Airport 75 to 100-foot AMSL notification boundary. Applicant has indicated they will adhere to tall structure review application with the Port Authority. And they are not located with any airport noise zones, airport runway protection zones, or airport residential and education facility protection zones. 60.3, concerning critical areas within the 6 Mile Cypress Basin. It's identified as a critical area for surface water management. Again, they have requested the ERP. And policy 60.3.1 does say the county will maintain provisions that reduce or eliminate the exemptions allowable in the 6 Mile Cypress, and they are not seeking any exemptions to that. 123.2.4 encourages the protection of viable tracts of sensitive and high-quality natural plant communities. Environmental staff did conduct a site inspection on March 10th, 2023, and concluded the project site does consist of uplands and wetland vegetation. They did not observe any protected species. Policy 125.1.2 says that the addition will not degrade surface and groundwater quality. The ERP covers that. So moving on, beyond the LEED plan compliance, they meet the code and other applicable county regulations, and they qualify for, they are not requesting any variances or deviations. They have the ERP and are compliant with land development codes. They are compatible with the surrounding uses. They will provide access, it does provide access already sufficient to support the proposed development. As the applicant demonstrated, there's another entryway going in off of Daniels. You also have Intrepid Lane that connects to Saddle Road and attaches to Halter and the lighted tree line. No expected impacts on transportation facilities. The applicant demonstrated they will go by county regulations. A traffic impact statement will be provided at time of development order. They will not adversely affect environmentally critical areas as they've demonstrated with the ERP. County staff did indicate upon their visit to the site that it would likely be a large project, which would require 20% open space, and they meet that and the native vegetation requirements and any required buffers per LDC 10-416. Urban services are fulfilled. They provided the letter of availability from Lee County Utilities. The property is located within the South Trail Fire Station District, EMS Medic 35, Lee County Sheriff, and the Lee Tran bus route. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Did applicant have anything?
No, thank you.
Staff? Okay. Were there any closing comments that anyone wanted to place on the record before we conclude?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you. It was a fairly straightforward request because it is a conventional rezoning. Unless the applicant elects to go to the board, it would be final with me. So I will get this out, I'm hopeful, shortly to not delay anything. And I appreciate everyone coming today and the thoroughness of both staff reports and both presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody stay well.
You too. Thank you.